Dzień dobry, witam wszystkich uczestników bardzo serdecznie na konferencji.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome all of the participants very warmly to the final conference summarizing the TRITIA project. My name is Aleksandra Krawucka. I'm the project manager. I'm very glad we can meet today and we can present the results of our project to you. Despite all the difficulties of recent months, the project consortium has worked very hard in order to come up with all the results, and we would like to share them with you. And that's the main goal of our conference. At the beginning, I'd like Director of the Upper Silesian Agency for Entrepreneurship and Development, Sylwia Rudek-Matuszczak, to say a few words. Then we'll present the project assumptions. Later on, we'll present a broader cross-border context of the TRITIA area, and then we'll discuss an even broader European context, especially Central European context. Later on, we will hear about the results worked out throughout the project, especially strategic documents, strategies, action plans, and then after a short break, we'll present a broader perspective for multimodal transportation development with special emphasis on waterways, railways, intermodal terminals. We'll present barriers, but also directions of development. If you have any questions during the presentations, you may ask them in our chat. After the presentations are finished, there will be a possibility to answer these questions in the chat module. But if you have more complex questions, we will collect all the questions, and after the conference, the speakers will give you answers to the questions. So after we collect all the answers, we'll send post-conference materials to you together with questions and answers. One more thing, our meeting is recorded, and the materials after this conference will be sent to you. If someone does not give his or her consent to that, please give us information about that via an email. And now it's time for Director of the Upper Silesian Agency for Entrepreneurship and Development to take the floor. It will be Sylwia Rudek-Matuszczak, and she will give us an introduction. Thank you. Good morning. It is a great pleasure for me to welcome you on behalf of the Upper Silesian Agency for Entrepreneurship and Development at the final conference summarizing our TRITIA project 3 years ago when we launched the project together with our partners from the Czech Republic and Slovakia. We knew that we had difficult and ambitious goals, but we also were aware that it is so important to improve strategic planning in the process of development of freight transport in Polish, Slovak and Czech cross-border areas, which are an important element of the main European corridor, transportation corridor between the Baltic Sea and the Adriatic Sea. We also knew that it is of key importance to strengthen coordination and cooperation and exchange of information between public entities and regional stakeholders, which are the entities for which transport is an element of their activity. As for details and results of the project, they will be discussed by our distinguished speakers later on during our final conference. As for me, I would like to say thank you to all of these people, institutions, companies, because due to their contribution, cooperation and help, they allowed us to come up with the results that we will discuss today. I am convinced that the substantial value of all the documents which were worked out thanks to analyses, consultations, and research, that these documents will be very important for our decision makers making decisions about transportation in such a way that it is economically viable and friendly for the environment, not only in our country or our partner countries, but in Central Europe in general. Let me say a few words about the Upper Silesian Agency for Entrepreneurship and Development, because not for everyone all the details of our activity are well known. The Upper Silesian Agency for Entrepreneurship and Development, we are a dynamic agency working in the business environment. We are a platform of cooperation and dialogue between entrepreneurs, regional and state authorities, and the sector of science. We want to support the economy of the region, and we want to stimulate development of entrepreneurship, especially for small and medium-sized enterprises, by providing support and promotion of innovative solutions and investments. Our activity can be divided into 3 areas. The first area is management of industrial parks and business centers located in several cities of the Silesian Voivodeship, and management of investment areas for which we look for new investors. Here, we often mention the areas which are post-industrial areas. They are degraded, and thanks to our activities and investments, we bring back to the markets, and actually we give them a new lease of life. In these areas, we created industrial parks, business centers, where entrepreneurs can rent out offices or shop floors, which are absolutely indispensable for their business activity. We also have well-prepared, attractive investment plots for the companies which are interested in investing in their own property. Another area of our activities is providing support in developing projects, supporting businesses. The agency has a lot of experience on that, and so far we have implemented more than 100 projects nationally and internationally, and these projects sometimes were carried out independently and sometimes as part of consortia. We have many services for companies, local governments. These are training activities, financial and consulting activities, consulting services. We provide complex support. We provide the location for business activity, for starting businesses. We also help in networking and looking for international partners. We also provide specialized services in commercialization of new technological and innovative solutions. In our offer, there are also services connected with managerial supervision and replacement investor. So far, we have trained more than 12,000 people, and we organized and provided more than 600 services. The third area of our activity are investment activities supporting economic development of the region. As I've mentioned, we create conditions for development for businesses in brownfield areas because we prepare these areas for new investors. We also prepare conditions for development of new specializations or sectors. 2 examples here. The first example is a cluster of medical products, MedSilesia. In 2016, it was called the National Key Cluster, and it contributes to development and strengthening one of smart specialization of the Silesian Voivodeship, namely medicine. The other example is a process of creating a new specialization for the city of Gliwice, and it is the sector of aviation. In a few days, there will be an opening of a new airstrip in the Gliwice airport. It was created due to the activities carried out by the Upper Silesian Agency, and these were activities connected with modernization of the airport, and it will contribution to development of general aviation in Gliwice. So I would like to invite you to cooperate with us. And now I would like to wish you a very interesting debate, interesting presentations. That's all from me. Thank you.
W kilku słowach
Przechodzę na angielski może, słuchaj.
o tym, do czego zmierzaliśmy i co udało nam się osiągnąć. Zacznę od tego, że projekt TRITIA, poprawa koordynacji, planowanie transportu towarowego na obszarze TRITIA jest projektem międzynarodowym, realizowanym na obszarze 3 krajów, 4 regionów. Jest to projekt, który realizowany jest na obszarze województwa śląskiego, województwa opolskiego ze strony polskiej, ze strony Republiki Czeskiej jest to kraj morawsko-śląski, ze strony Słowacji jest to kraj żyliński. Projekt jest współfinansowany ze środków Europejskiego Funduszu Rozwoju Regionalnego w ramach programu Interreg Europa Środkowa. I biorąc pod uwagę lokalizację obszaru, znaczne zagęszczenie ludności, poziom rozwoju regionu, a także ważne ośrodki przemysłowe i przede wszystkim przebieg korytarza transportowego Bałtyk-Adriatyk, widzimy, że jest to obszar o znacznych wyzwaniach transportowych i to te właśnie wyzwania transportowe stanowiły punkt wyjścia dla realizacji projektu. Projekt został początkowo zainicjowany przez Europejskie Ugrupowanie Współpracy Terytorialnej TRITIA, który działa na rzecz lepszego połączenia i rozwoju całego przygranicznego obszaru regionu i łączy obszary polsko-czesko-słowackiego pogranicza.
Przepraszam bardzo Pani Olu, bo my widzimy prezentację od Pani...
Because we can see Marta Slavikova's presentation and not your presentation, and we would like to see your presentation.
Tak, czy teraz lepiej? Czy
tak,
teraz widać już
teraz dopiero widać. Tak.
Dobrze, dziękuję bardzo za informację.
Thank you for the information. Now we see the right presentation. So the TRITIA project is an international one, which is carried out in partnership. The leader is the Upper Silesian Agency for Entrepreneurship and Development in Gliwice. And there are partners on the Czech side, Ostrava, the Union for Development of the Moravian Silesian region, as well as Doprawny Projektowani on the Slovak part from Żylina, is the Transport Research Institute and University of Żylina. What was also important during the project was the European Grouping of Territorial Cooperation TRITIA, so EGTC TRITIA. As for the main concepts of the project, they revolve around various activities connected with improving planning, coordination and flow of information among regional stakeholders and authorities in development of freight transport in TRITIA territory. So there is this narrower and broader context. And while preparing the project, we want to emphasize the significance of the multimodal nature of freight transportation. And our goal is to follow the guidelines of the EU White Paper on Transportation. So we want to take freight transport mostly from roads to railways and waterways. So we want to shift the transportation to more eco-friendly modes. In order to attain these goals, the starting point for us was an analysis of an existing situation. So on the basis of the data we collected, on the basis of the studies that we carried out within the project, we prepared a diagnosis of barriers, needs and bottlenecks. Later on, we analyzed possible directions of development, possible solutions, and we prepared some proposals and recommendations and proposals of solutions. It was the main result of the project. All these activities were organized in a broad cooperation with a large group of experts, international experts, and the trans-border approach, the international approach, and this focus on cooperation was of key importance to us because it helped us to attain the assumed goals. So there was involvement of international stakeholders, experts. There were many workshops, discussions, meetings. Thanks to that, we were able to work out the solutions responding to trans-border challenges. And that is how we have created a set of strategic documents which we want to discuss today. These documents were created on the basis of the model of transport for the Trans-TRITIA area. This model was worked out during transportation studies. Again, it will be discussed in detail later, but on the basis of the results and data collected, we jointly prepared a set of strategic documents, and among them, we may mention the regional multimodal freight transport strategy, 3 trans-border action plans for every border crossing, for trans-border areas, and 3 action plans on inland waterways, railways, and intermodal terminals and logistics centers. The documents which were drafted within the project are like ready-made recommendations ready to be implemented. They take into account all the identified barriers and needs, but also directions for development and the way of shifting the freight transportation to inland waterways and railways. They point at key investments and projects which aim at increasing capacities of the alternative waterways and railways, increasing their capacity as such. And additionally, we also mention formal and legal suggestions, recommendations, for example, the necessity to have unification of transportation flow procedures in cross-border areas. We also mentioned that it is necessary to support alternative modes of transportation and the necessity of introduction of certain incentives. All these documents include very practical guidelines, suggestions ready to be implemented, just like the set of investments, projects which are necessary to implement them, then financial means, sources of financing, activities, schedule, or the way of monitoring, evaluation, as well as the institutions that should be involved in implementation of these activities so that all these guidelines can be met and implemented in practice. Under the projects, we would like to distribute all these results so that they are then implemented in practice, so that they are well known, so that they reach many authorities and many groups of people. So the scope of dissemination of the results is really broad, because the information presented in our documents and the results of the project, not only regionally and not only nationally, but they also matter at a European level. So there are different dimensions of our outreach, and we participated in various activities in order to disseminate our results. For example, we participated in the update of transport system development strategy for Silesian Voivodeship, and there was revision of TEN-T network. We participated in preparation of analyses under the Odra Waterway Development Program, so on the Oder River. And we participated in the activities on the development of the national transportation development, where we disseminated and shared the results of our project. We are also invited as the project to participate in the transportation committee to Geneva, and we visited Geneva, and at the UN forum, we also presented the results of our project and our action plan. As for all these documents and what is included in them, well, it will be discussed in more detail later on. I just wanted to make an introduction to that. I wanted to give you general information, so I guess that's all from me for now. Let me just say one more thing, that all these reports which were prepared under the project will be available at our project website. So I do encourage you to have a look at the website or at our Facebook profile. Now, individual experts will take the floor and they will discuss the results of the project in more detail. First of all, I would like to ask Madam Director of the European Grouping of Territorial Cooperation, Marta Slavikova, to say a few words about the TRITIA region, in cooperation with which European grouping our project has been implemented. So I'm giving the floor over to Marta Slavikova. Thank you.
Ďakujem za slovo. Ja by som poprosila tú prezentáciu, lebo ste mi ju stopli.
Dziękuję za słowa. Ja poproszę tą prezentację, Państwo mi ją zatrzymali.
Ja chyba neviem, či ju vidie.
Chyba nie widać. Moment.
No, ja na początku zacznę bez prezentácie, ale zacznę slovensky.
Ja zacznę bez prezentacji, będę mówiła po słowacku. Dziękuję za możliwość być na tej konferencji. Dziękuję za możliwość, że mogłam być w grupie projektowej tego projektu.
Predstaviť EZUS TRITIA, Európske zoskupenie územnej spolupráce TRITIA. A teraz by sa mi hodila tá prezentácia. Bude.
If it's available. Can you see the presentation? Yes. The European Grouping of Territorial Cooperation, TRITIA, operates on a large territory. It is large for us because it is half of the Slovak Republic, but despite that we have only 3 members. These are 3 regions, that's Silesian region, Voivodeship, Žilina region, Moravian Silesian region. This is one big organization of the European.
V rámci TRITIA, v rámci tohto veľkého priestoru realizujeme.
We implement various topics that relate to cross-border cooperation, that's environmental protection, air protection, education, tourism promotion, and of course, the topic of transport is important because the ways don't end at borders. The entire area has 24,000 square kilometers. It is a half of the Slovak Republic, and the population is 6.5 million. It is a large space, and it gives us a lot of opportunities for good quality projects, because in this area, the studies make sense, not only regional, but European-wide sense. And in 2017, we started to prepare this project that is ending these days. It's been prepared by EGTC TRITIA with its partners, and there have been certain political influences, and that's why TRITIA became only associate partner, but I am still grateful for being a partner. The TRITIA space is interconnected through various transport means. We have highways, railways, but also airways. Each of our region has its own airport, and we can also interconnect in a freight waterway. The transportation routes are very thick, dense, and it is important to use them well. Of course, businesses use it the most, and the state. To cooperate it and to coordinate it well, we need good data, and the data must be processed well. For example, we can talk about the density of traffic and so on. They are at various levels, and they are obtained by various models. And it is not always simple to plan the strategic connections between the states. We know that if a truck that goes just doesn't disappear at borders, but the track needs similar good quality conditions for transport. And we, as inhabitants of the TRITIA region, know that when we have traffic, we always have trans-border and cross-border traffic. And we perceived borders not as an obstacle, but as something that provides us with various methodologies. That's why we've raised this TRITIA project that interconnects the Polish, Slovak, and Czech cooperation. As I've mentioned, TRITIA prepared the project with the Polish partners, and we compiled a great project team. At this final conference, we will summarize the results. We will hear expert opinions, strategies, visions, planning, management of freight transport in this TRITIA region, as we call it. I know the results of the project well, and these are not only theoretical models, these are usable data with particular information, and I will be very happy to see if those documents created in this project will be used in reality by all departments dealing with freight transport, not only in the TRITIA region, but in whole nations, all countries, Czech Republic, Poland, Slovak. And in this conclusion, I would like to thank the patrons of the project. That's the Moravian Silesian region, the region of Žilina, for the participation, and to our Polish partner for enabling us this great project. Also, thank you to the international group, to all project partners for the cooperation, for coordination, because we cannot finish and end work on such project. And I believe that the new technologies will provide us with not only opportunities, but with incentives for cooperation, because the topic is important. And the individual sub-projects important for the development. We see that we have new railway track, our new waterway, and supplementing, reloading, and transshipment centers. These are sub-projects that will have to be worked on in the scope of international cooperation, not to make the trucks disappear at borders, but to ensure fluent flow of traffic and not to stress the inhabitants of the relevant area. This is a plan for freight transport, but this will improve the life of the usual current inhabitants of the regions. It's been a great pleasure, and I thank to all of you personally that you have participated in the project. Thank you for being included in the region.
Dziękuję Pani Marto. Dziękuję Pani Marto, dziękuję za te informacje przekazane nam na temat ugrupowania TRITIA, rozwoju regionu i
development of the region and you're emphasizing the importance of that connection for the region and for the area. And in particular for the transportation, as you've rightly mentioned, these areas are not separated, they're interconnected, and the transfer must be going on smoothly and must continue smoothly for the region to be able to grow. So thank you much for your presentation, for your report, and let us now move on to the next presentation. So I would like to give the floor to Winfried Reed from the Joint Secretariat of the Interreg CE to present this common European context for Central Europe. And could you please present your presentation on connecting the peripheral and border regions to the center? Thank you. The floor is yours.
Good morning from Vienna, and thank you for the invitation and thank you for...
Děkuji za pozvání a děkuji za příležitost, že...
uzupełnienia wyników projektu.
And if I just want to share my screen with you. Can you see my presentation well? And can you hear me well? Maybe you can give me feedback. Okay.
Yes, we can hear, we can see the presentation.
Great. So thanks a lot. I will focus on in my presentation on two main points. First is transport and mobility projects in peripheral and border regions in the present program. So this is complementing your project.
W regionach peryferyjnych i granicznych w Europie Środkowej.
Abyste se mohli podívat,
challenges, maybe interesting ideas, interesting solutions, so as a stimulation for your discussion. And the second element is to look to the future, to the new program, to give you a little bit information about the draft Central Europe program for the next 7 years. So let's jump now to the presentation. Well, but it is not moving. Okay. Okay. Talking about border regions, I think this is a first good impression from a study from the European Commission published last year about missing cross-border rail links. And then you have an interesting pattern in Central Europe, full of these internal borders and also full of missing links across borders, just to zoom in a little bit and to give you an impression about the situation in Central Europe in a nutshell. Then having a look at our program and the transport priority, we have 16 projects in this priority with a funding of 28 million euros ERDF and with around 160 institutions working on topics to better connect Central Europe. Basically in two dimensions, focused on freight transport, but also on passengers. And now I will have a closer look. First, this is your immediate environment, projects dealing with multimodal freight transport. We have projects like TRITIA or multimodal that are dealing with intermodal transport across borders. We have other projects that are more focused on intermodal nodes and terminals like Comodalce, Intergreen nodes, and TOCnet. Then there is a project Core Hub that is working along a 10T corridor, the Orient East Med corridor from Rostock, Berlin, Prague, Brno to Budapest. And then another project is focused on regional rail feeder lines, RIFE. This is the first overview on mobility projects, but there's a second dimension, of course, in transport. It's not only about freight transport, but it's also about passenger. And in this second priority, regional transport systems and links to 10T, we have different groups of projects, transport links within and across border regions, connect to CE and transborder, projects focusing on integrated passenger transport in peripheral regions. There's a big group like Peripheral Access, Rumobil, SMACA, Regiomobil. Then SharePlace is focused on smart mobility solutions and intelligent transport systems. Subnodes is more dealing with secondary nodes outside the main urban centers, but not in the periphery, so somewhere in between. And then we have another interesting project focused on the needs of young people in rural area, mobility services for young people. And now I will focus and pick some of these examples because I assume that for the transport and freight transport projects and logistic projects, you have already a good overview, but this one, maybe they can be interesting for you as well. And having a look at some of the pilot action in these projects. This is a table from the Connect to See projects. You see the location of some of the pilots. For instance, also at the border region from Germany and Poland, development of new services across the border for public transport. You can see also testing extended cross-border railway services between Italy and Austria, cross-border ticketing between Slovenia and Italia, then public service obligation on the border between Slovenia and Croatia, and so on. We could go on like that, but I will jump now in a quick picture about one of these examples. You see this is the border region between Austria, Italy, and Slovenia. New train lines along this route between Villach, Udine, and Trieste. So improving services of rail across borders. Another pilot action that is, of course, it's not only the services, the infrastructure, but it's also ticketing. And that one of the pilots of this project was also dealing with integrated ticketing, because still this is not so well coordinated across borders, and this is necessary to improve. Another interesting example is the project Peripheral Access. in the border region between Austria and the Czech Republic, demand responsive buses across borders. So there's a joint planning across borders, but there's also testing of these new routes during one summer. Then jumping again to another border region, Transborders project, working in the border region between Austria and Slovenia in the Carinthian region. So first of all, they developed a joint action plan linking bikes, rails, and buses. And based on that, they had an interesting pilot where they link train services for bicycles across borders in this area. This is just a very quick information, but of course, if you want to know more, if you want to read about all these examples that I mentioned, there are different options that we offer you. On the program website, there are the project stories. This is maybe the easiest and most appealing way of getting into those projects. Then, of course, the project have their own project websites hosted on the program website. And the third element, how to approach is this, the most important outputs are collected in the output library. So you can search along the different topics to find out what's going on in the projects. So, and now let me jump from the present program to the new one, because the future is already here. During the whole year, we continued with an intensive process of analyzing needs in the territories to also develop new priorities, actions for the new program, and then in a certain loop, a feedback loop with stakeholders at the regional and national level, involvement of stakeholders, consultations, web-based, but also a lot of events in the different participating countries to get this feedback of stakeholders to fine-tune the future priorities of the program. And this overview is the draft strategy of the program that is still in discussion, and a very important element is still missing. It is the budget. And of course, having the budget figures, I think this will be revised again. But you see this, the main elements already here. The priority 1, a smarter Central Europe. Priority 2, greener Central Europe. Priority 3, the more connected or better connected Central Europe. This may be most interesting for you and for your project partners to have a little bit closer look beyond the priorities. We have specific objectives. And the first one, the specific objective 3.1, improving transport connection of rural and peripheral regions. This is something that would offer you, if you want to go on, an opportunity to make a next step of cooperation and to go on facing similar challenges that you face now. And the second element in this priority of a more connected Central Europe is green urban mobility in Central Europe. So decarbonization of urban transport in functional urban areas, something that may be also familiar to you in the present program. So these are the two main options for transport, but please have also a look at this priority 4, better governance in Central Europe, governance for integrated territorial development. So, of course, you can see transport also closely linked to regional development. And if you have ideas to integrate transport in a package of integrated development, this priority could be interesting for you in the new program. And this is also for you now an interesting point, because the project is coming to an end. You can demonstrate your results, and I want to encourage you to do as much as possible about the communication of results, because this is also the time when you can influence the new program, because now everybody is interested in good results, to also include this as an input to the discussion, to the shape of the new program. And this is constantly going on. Next week we have another meeting with our stakeholders. So if you are very active now and present your results. I think this is a smart idea. I was referring to this already a little bit during the last year, the partner dialogues with the transnational survey, the national events, drafting and rewriting the program, discussing with our stakeholders, the working group for the new program. And then the aim is still that we can submit at least a technical version at the end of the year, and then to be ready next year with opening the first call for proposals of the new program. So, and the next year is around the corner. If you want to have also more detailed information on the programming process and the relevant documents, please just go to our program website, and we have an own section on this Central Europe 21 to 27 with a draft strategy, with the position paper of the Commission, with documents, general information, as well as our territorial analysis for Central Europe. And if you have more questions to me, here are my contact details, and I'm happy to answer your questions. And of course, I'm also available now during the meeting. Thank you, and I hand back to you.
Dziękuję bardzo panu Winfriedowi za przedstawienie informacji.
We thank you so much for Mr. Reed for your presentation on the Interreg program for Central Europe. So let us now move on to the part devoted to presentation of our project results. So first, let me give the floor to Katarzyna Don from the Polish Agency for Entrepreneurship and Development. And Katarzyna will give us a presentation on the regional strategies of multimodal freight transport. Thank you very much, Winfried, and Katarzyna, the floor is yours.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is my great pleasure to be able to present the results of the works of our team, and it was focused on WPT1. These are partial results which focused on preparing regional strategy for multimodal freight transport in the TRITIA area. And now I would like to share my presentation with you. Ladies and gentlemen, the document called Regional Strategy for Multimodal Freight Transport for the TRITIA area has been drafted for a period of time overlapping with the period of time for implementation of the projects. So it wouldn't be possible to create this document without cooperation from you as the partners of the project, or without cooperation of stakeholders. Katarzyna, if I may cut in, we can't see your presentation, so we can't see it. I'm sharing my presentation now. It should be now visible. I can see it, so some people can see it, some cannot. Because I can see myself on Artur Całka's screen region, but here I need it was formulated during consultations with stakeholders on a very broad scale, actually. And it was important because we wanted a strategy to respond to the challenges of regional development. Well, they are obviously defined in various EU strategies. It is also defined in the EU White Paper on transport. So we can say that it is like a plan of creating a unified EU area for transportation. So among the strategic goals, I don't want to create a ranking of the goals, but what is important there is growth of multimodal freight transport in the whole territory of the TRITIA area, because it is also our response to the challenges included in the EU White Paper. Then number 2 is supporting initiatives aimed at increasing the competitiveness of multimodal transport in the TRITIA cross-border area. It shows to all the stakeholders that it makes sense and pays off to undertake activities aiming at supporting competitiveness of multimodal transport. So it is not abstract, it is very significant for local communities, and it is very important for attaining some social goals. There is also minimization of external costs of transportation, and these are the costs which are borne actually by the society because they are connected with the transportation activities. So let me just say the transportation activity, especially on roads, has a very high impact on the growth of external costs of transportation. Then we defined another goal, namely promotion of multimodal transport as an environmentally friendly solution, and the solution which has a positive impact on the standard of living of citizens. How will it be possible? Yes, it will be possible if we undertake initiatives focused on development of the multimodal freight transport. We also need fair competition in these markets. We need support of initiatives for the increase of the number of experts in the market of multimodal freight transport. So here, we decided to do the following. Each of these goals to be attained in the future needs to be translated into, or needs to be prepared by means of a tool which is not very frequently used in the context of development of regional strategies. Well, if these are strategies for development of enterprises, well, it is used sometimes there, but we wanted to adapt this tool, and this tool precisely is a balanced scorecard, and we wanted to apply it to help us attain the goals that we listed just before. A classical approach of the balanced scorecards was not possible to be applied in our context. So, as the team, we needed to change certain perspectives. So, we wanted to have the vision, the mission, and then prepare a stakeholder perspective, then a financial perspective, then a safety and sustainable development perspective, process perspective, infrastructure perspective, and finally, a development perspective. These were the perspectives that we needed. That is why we were able to strike a certain balance between implementation of these goals, or maybe between certain guidelines, how to try and attain the goals. And here we prepared the strategy map. Due to the perspectives I've just mentioned, the perspectives that needed to be adapted to the strategy of development of multimodal freight transport were then translated into formulation of partial goals, and the realization of partial goals would help us to attain the strategic goals for development of multimodal freight transport And finally, it would help us to create a vision of multimodal freight transport in the cross-border TRITIA area. It would also help us to attain the mission which was formulated like that. Each of the partial goals was then divided into indexes and measures which needed to be attained and which needed to be monitored all the time. And let me just emphasize that if we monitor these measures and indexes, well, we need to monitor them in order to attain our final goals. Under these goals, and within our work on the strategy map, and as a result of very complex analyses, thanks to all these activities, we were able to formulate 3 strategic projects. In our opinion, if these projects will be implemented, they will contribute to attaining our goals, which were outlined previously. So the first strategic project here is Observatory of Multimodal Transport in the cross-border area. Acronym is Observatory. So it will be about opening of a specialized observatory, which will be responsible for observing technological and market trends in development of multimodal transport in the cross-border area. It is a challenge for us, and we would like to meet that challenge. It will respond to very specific needs of entities which operate in the whole ecosystem of freight transport in the Trans-TRITIA area. And obviously, it will also observe development of multimodal freight transport. It will observe positioning of key areas. It will also assess efficiency of development activities. And here, we added, well, I'm thinking about the formulation of the phrase. I don't want to call them sub-projects, but perhaps I will describe it. We believe that it is absolutely necessary to have a committee there under this notion of the observatory. I guess Gabriela will emphasize how significant it is to focus on inland waterways and inland navigation. It is absolutely necessary for implementation of our strategy. Obviously, there will be other tasks within this framework of the observatory, but the Committee for Inland Navigation will be absolutely necessary. I know I've been talking for very long, but I hope it was highly informative. I'm grateful to previous speakers because they were very brief, so I have a little bit more time. So the second project is coordinator of the multimodal transport network, and the coordinator should prepare a certain model of coordination of the whole network, of multimodal freight transportation for the TRITIA area. We want to make it fully in line with guidelines of the modern transportation policy. We wanted to emphasize the need to create integrated and sustainable system with for many modes of transportation, and then the strategic projects connected with competence center on sustainable flows in freight transport in the TRITIA area. So it is about designing innovative services centers, which will make it possible to have sustainable, balanced flow using vehicles powered by alternative sources of energy, for example. I guess it is an excellent idea because it fits in very well with what the previous speaker has said, because it will meet some of the demands of the transportation policy for EU member states and some guidelines connected with the necessity to develop eco-mobility and using alternative fuels. Ladies and gentlemen, implementation of the strategy, because now I'm talking about the implementation stage, and it wouldn't be possible without defining an organizational framework, because it is a key element for our methodology and for our strategy. You may notice that the key entity here, and I may emphasize it here as well, because it was verified, it was discussed, a lot of work was put into it, workshops, in order to work out this organizational framework. It was agreed with Director Marta Slavikova, namely EGTC TRITIA can take this coordinating function and become the coordinator for implementation of the guidelines which were included in the strategy. It won't be possible without the support from financial institutions, institutions which cooperate, namely the institutions which are partners of our current project, and the main stakeholders, as well as the institutions with vested interests in implementation of individual parts of the strategy, or to some extent will be responsible for its implementation. And obviously, you may notice that the core on which implementation of the strategy will be based and attaining the goals of the strategy is implementation of the 3 strategic projects. I think that as to how we are going to do that and what will be significant elements connected with implementation of the strategy, well, they were included in the action plans, and I believe that my colleague will tell you more about them. She will discuss main elements of the action plans because they are compatible with what I've presented to you in my presentation. That's all from me. Thank you very much for your attention.
Dziękuję bardzo pani Katarzynie za przedstawienie.
Katarzyna, thank you very much for offering such a detailed presentation of the strategy. So now, Lila Knop, could you please give us more specific action plans on that more important implementative side, so to elaborate on what Katarzyna was saying. Lila Knop. Well, good morning. I would just like to ask you for the screen sharing option, please.
Chwileczkę, już tutaj będziemy udostępniać, chwilkę.
Your screen will be shared in a moment.
Okay. Już prezentacja powinna się pojawić w każdej chwili.
Sądzę, jest widoczna, tak?
Tak.
Well, I hope that everyone can see my presentation right now. everyone. I'm so happy that I can share my presentation with you and I can speak to you at this meeting. Well, obviously, the plans and research are involved in the implementation of the strategy for developing and growing multimodal transportation in Trans-TRITIA region. This is one of the elements which is going to give us the basis for working on more specific actions and activities in the project. At the same time, that is the added value of the project. Works on the plans and on these analyses were continued intensively also at the time of the pandemic. Our workshops, which also revised our actions and all the actions that were to involve our analyzing bottlenecks at borders and in border regions. Well, that was the difficulty. The difficulty was the time that was tough. We had to meet a number of stakeholders. We had to analyze complex points. So we were working on analyses for each specific border, but this way we could also develop some concepts, plans, which are up here for direct implementation. So in reference to the action plans, the main objective was identify and implement in consideration of solutions and strategic objectives and in consideration of the multimodal project. So it was important to identify bottlenecks or a bottleneck and the projects that would allow us to implement the strategy, while also addressing challenges in the environment in reference to the European white paper that has been mentioned here on many instances. So it was about prioritizing these projects, budgeting them, and assigning their owners. So we identified project names, and also we revised them in terms of what is being delivered and developed. There is a portion which could be the basis for continuation on a broader basis in different borders. So we presented our map, identified project owners, and we were potentially working on budgets and presented the scale and sources of financing. As the end result, we came up with several dozen projects in different borders. So we had 3 reports on specific priorities, 3 reports on project budgeting, and 3 action plans. So there was a series of documents, a number of documents, which obviously are available under the project. So first we had this Polish-Czech plan that selected 23 projects in the field of rail transport, 13 road transport projects, and 6 inland waterway transport projects. So actually here, we're talking about transferring the flow of freight from road to rail and to waterways. But we've noticed in projects that without some specific investment in the road system, the e-rail, so rail or waterway transport opportunities are not viable. So we would like to have all that composed together, and we would like to deliver on the objectives which are included in the transport strategies. In terms of prioritizing these projects, all inland waterway projects have high priority. 19 of the railway projects have a high priority, and 3 of the road projects have a high priority. Now, if we look at the roadmap of the infrastructure projects on the Polish-Czech border, so if we look midterm and long-term and type of priority, we have projects on the Polish-Czech border identified, 42 of them, and they were heavily debated among shareholders and project partners. They were also debated. We were also planning to debate them and discuss them with stakeholders, including regional authorities. With that, we could revise that in terms of the future outcomes and deliverables. For the Polish-Slovakian border, we identified 11 projects. Some from the point of view of the rail transport. All these projects, they have a high priority. So there are fewer such projects, but they generate some specific needs and priorities that have been discussed in action plans and in the part which applies to budgeting and is and needs to be reassigned to project owners. Then we have 14 projects on the Polish-Slovak border, and there are 9 projects in the field of rail transport and 5 road transport projects, and then we have we emphasize some projects which are important for maintaining a smooth flow of transport, and that is all for in the mid-term time frame. Then we have the cross-border action plan in terms of certain conclusions. So we have 67 projects that give us an option to reconsider potential delivery on our strategy. So these action plans have been prepared by our partners, and they refer to some very specific, very concrete areas. So that is about actions needed for terminals, for rail transport, waterway transport. So that additional information is quite crucial for us. We have also some additional projects that had been, which operated so far as projects in the area of organization. Now, we looked at the source of financing. We looked at that in terms of funding that has been planned or assigned, but we also look into the future. At the point in time where we're now, although the EU is now at the budgeting stage, we have the basis to believe that these assumptions that have been already formulated in terms of strategic solutions undoubtedly follow the key assumptions and guidelines at the European level, so low emission, environmental friendly solutions, actions under the more connected Europe, that is action 3, measure 3. And then we have action plans for the European Green Order. And now when we look at that process of developing our regional strategies, we analyzed our strategies for the Silesian region, which is called the Green Silesian region. So we have that strategy, we have action plan, we have these assumptions. Well, obviously, we are dealing with the pandemic, and there might be some funding reshuffle, but we have this budgeting perspective, which is 2030, which strongly emphasizes the sustainability component, mobility component, environment-friendly component. So these priorities are very high. So we heard from other speakers today, including Mr. Reid, who spoke about potential allocation of these funds. So we believe that that is all implementable. I thank you very much for your attention.
Halo, halo? Czy mnie słychać? Drobne mieliśmy tutaj problemy techniczne, ale chyba już wszystko powinno zostać...
Już dobrze.
Tak, czy już?
Już cię słyszymy, Pani Aleksandro.
Czyli już jestem słyszalna. Czyli w takim razie ja bardzo serdecznie dziękuję Pani Lili za...
Excellent. Lila, thank you so much for...
Bo ja się teraz wystraszyłam, że ja mówiłam do pustki, czyli... Nie, słyszeliśmy wszystko.
We could hear you. Thank you. Thank you very much again, Lila. Our apologies for some small technical issues, but everything works very well. So we are moving on to the next presentation. Paweł Santarius, you please give us some information on the next area of operation, and that is specifically waterways rail and intermodal logistics centers, terminals. Pavel Santarius, the floor is yours.
Tak, witam, chciałbym. Okej. Nie mogę podłączyć prezentacji.
Jeszcze chyba chwileczkę. Ze względu na pewne tutaj kłopoty techniczne.
Because of some technical issues, we suggest to have this coffee break, which was actually planned in half an hour.
Halo, halo? Tak?
Tak, słyszymy się?
Tak. Szanowni Państwo, witamy po przerwie. Sytuacja została opanowana, także teraz już powinno być w porządku. Przepraszamy za tą przerwę techniczną, ale już jest w porządku, także zapraszamy serdecznie. Mam nadzieję, że wszyscy już uczestnicy zdążyli wrócić i są na miejscu, także możemy kontynuować. Zapraszam wobec tego pana Pawła Santariusa do przedstawienia planów działania w zakresie żeglugi, kolei i intermodalnych terminali.
Halo, słyszymy się?
Tak?
Słyszymy się, Pani Olu?
Tak, tak, ja słyszę.
No to rozpoczynamy. Dobry den všem.
Natomiast jeszcze jest kwestia obrazu, także Panie Pawle, widzimy pana ekran. Okej.
Tak, no. Co teraz?
Jest pan Paweł. Teraz proszę jeszcze
Teraz
raz
wszystko
uruchomić
działa,
kamerę.
teraz się słyszymy i widzimy się, ok?
Teraz widzimy pana, słyszymy pana. Teraz tylko prosimy o wyświetlenie pana prezentacji.
No o to właśnie próbuję coś z tym zrobić. Powinno działać.
Zgadza się, wszystko widać.
Fajnie. Także dobry den všem.
Good afternoon to everyone. My name is Pavel Santorius. I represent the Union for the Development of Moravian Silesian Region. It is an entity leading to working package number 2. And in the scope of this package, we've prepared 3 action plans to introduce the possibility of fulfilling the requirements of the White Paper 2001, which are the topics that my colleague from the Silesian University presented before me. Of course, the 3 action plans were aimed at finding or adaptation to the requirements of the White Paper for Transport. The reference here is the 2030, by which the rail and water traffic should accommodate for road transport. In the package, we've processed freight transport, and the result are 3 action plans for waterways, railways, and logistics centers. So I will briefly summarize the topics of the packages. Let's start with waterways or action plan for waterways. During those 3 years, experts from Slovak Republic, Poland, and Czech Republic discussed the current status of waterways, how it is done, what is the situation, whether we can even consider transferring other freight transport to waterways. Another part was detail conditions and of the transfer to waterways. I gave an example of a table talking about costs of transport. So here you can see that the last line is that's water is usually the lowest. It is a hidden criterion for shippers. If the waterways are to be expanded, it could bring savings. Of course, we were not alone in creating the plans. Our project partners and teams participated. We've processed the output with experts dealing daily with the topic. And in a workshop held in Ostrava, you can see a beautiful picture of captains from waterways from Poland, and they've advised us, and we would like to thank them if they're watching. The result of the investigation is an action plan waterways. You can see the letters and numbers DT211, DT212. These refer to outputs in the entire project. To summarize it, in the action plans, we've prepared movies. I will try to play them 2 or 3 minutes, and it shows the output for waterways. TRITIA je název pro seskupení 3 evropských příhraničních regionů. A v České republice, Slezské vojvodci v Polsku a Žilinský samosprávný kraj na Slovensku. TRITIA patří mezi nejlidnatější přeshraniční území v Evropě, což sebou přináší značné dopravní zatížení. Prognózy ukazují, že situace se bude zhoršovat. A do roku 2030 dojde k vytížení dopravy. Jedním z řešení této krizové situace je přesunout část nákladní dopravní ze silnic na vodní. Tento plán je plně v souladu s cíli dopravní strategie Evropské unie, která říká,
80% of freight transport should be shifted from road to rail and waterways by 2030. Inland waterways. Infrastructure in the TRITIA area is inadequate for current needs. The only navigable route is the Oder waterway, connecting the northwestern part of the TRITIA area with the nearest seaport in Szczecin, Poland. However, it's used only sporadically to Kędzierzyn-Koźle and the connecting Gliwice Canal. Moreover, its capacity is insufficient. The Trans-TRITIA project has developed an action plan for inland waterway development. Its implementation would enable a shift of up to 30% in freight transportation in the project area from land roads to inland waterways. The action plan proposes the extension of the Odra waterway in the Kędzierzyn-Koźle-Ostrava section to the Class 5B level, the construction of the Silesian Canal in Class 5B level, and the adaptation of the Gliwice Canal to Class 5A. This would all be implemented by the year 2030 at a total cost estimated at 4.3 billion euros. The project also highlights the logic of continuing the expansion of the Oder waterway and Vach waterway from the south of Slovakia to Žilina after 2030. The relevant ministries in Poland, the Czech Republic, and Slovakia have started to develop inland waterways in the Trans-TRITIA area. One of the common objectives is to integrate the Oder waterway into the Trans-European Transport Network known as TEN-T, to be updated in 2023. This inclusion will enable financial support for investments from European funds. The TRITIA project is co-financed by the Interreg Central Europe program. For more information, visit www.interreg-central.eu/TRITIA.
Takže toto bylo ve stručnosti, co v akčním plánu je obsaženo.
What has been included in the action plan? You could see that there is a theoretic way that waterways would be expanded at the TRITIA territory in the direction of the Czech Republic and the Silesian waterway in Poland. This is connection of Odra and Wisla in Polish territory. And the third important project is the Gliwice Channel modernization, which is underway. For your information, in the action plan, you can see a table for Silesian channel. You can see the activities, time periods, and amounts. So if you are interested, you can find it in the action plan. All the information for potential development of waterways are processed there. Of course, it is related to information we've heard in the strategy. We've defined a monitoring or action committees, that means tasks for the, I would call it, supervising, monitoring groups, what should be done or how it should be done. So we would watch for compliance of the initiatives and activities. This is all to waterways. And I will move to railways, an action plan for railways. It has a similar structure. During those 3 years, we've dealt with the current situation, information from Slovak, Polish, Czech Republic, all has been consulted at meetings with relevant entities, companies, organizations dealing with freight transport. We got feedback. Whether our ideas and proposals are correct. And when they've agreed with us, we started the action plan. And again, we gathered a lot of information, tables, and the output of it is a short movie I will play for you so you can see the possibilities of railways in TRITIA. These are the most important
The current capacity of railways in the Trans-TRITIA area would not allow for a transfer of 30% of the current volume of road transport. Already today, many sections of the lines operate at capacity. This makes the average speed of freight trains much lower than in other European regions. Some freight trains can't even be used. In the event of repair or accidents, traffic has to be redirected, causing delays. The modernization rate over the past 25 years has been insufficient. New transport capacity must be created to increase network capacity in the Trans-TRITIA area. The Trans-TRITIA project has therefore developed an action plan for the development of the railway network. It proposes an increase in capacity in the following sections. Opole, Katowice, Krakow, by creating a new freight corridor. Přerov, Ostrava, by adding a third track, and Přerov, Ostrava, Katowice, by building a high-speed line which would enable long-distance passenger traffic from existing lines and create better conditions for the transportation of goods, as well as the implementation of a 25 kilovolt, 50 Hz overhead contact line power supply system with a greater gradient. All of this would need to be achieved by 2030 at a total estimated cost of 16 billion euros. Legislative changes are also needed, in particular, the harmonization of economic conditions between rail and road transport in order to remain competitive, and the removal of obstacles to rail transport when crossing national borders. The Trans-TRITIA project is co-financed by the Interreg Central Europe program. For more information, visit www.interreg-central.eu/TRANSTRITIA.
Takže a teď pojďme na ten třetí.
So let's get to the third action plan, logistic terminals. Logically following the two previous ones and also the railroad network, because it is now in a quite good condition. So now we propose development of the railways and of course waterways as well. And to move between those two, we need new logistic centers or the modernization of the already existing ones. So again, in those activities, we've mapped practically all important logistic centers in the territory of the Polish Republic, Slovak Republic. We've negotiated with people, stakeholders, majors. We've closely cooperated with them. We've asked them whether they want a logistics center, whether their territorial plans even consider it. And we want to have the logistics centers to be not just reloading of goods, but to be prepared for waterways. So there would be 3 model centers. And here we can see action plans, information. We don't have to go into very detail. It has been complied and compiled. The documents that our colleagues processed are extensive. Here you can see the growth of freight transport, for example. So I think our colleagues did good work. They expert showed us how we can obtain the inputs, and our other partners also helped us, and it really made sense and logic. So I will play the third movie, which will make the topic of logistics centers and the possibilities of where it and how it could operate.
Provide appropriate facilities for the reloading and storage of goods, including the construction of modern logistics centers where goods will be reloaded from trucks to rail and inland waterways. Several logistics centers are already operating in the Trans-Tritia area. However, their capacity and services are far from meeting the real needs or conditions of Western Europe. Currently, waterway transportation of goods exists more on a theoretical level. The Trans-Tritia project has prepared an action plan for the construction of major logistics centers, including the adaptation of 4 existing logistics centers into top-level terminals, the construction of 1 new logistics center, the creation of sufficient capacity to connect these logistics centers to major road, rail, and waterways, enabling regular connections from these 5 logistics centers to as many destinations as possible, and amending legislation so that these logistics centers operate as open parts of the public transportation infrastructure operated by private operators. Following the Trans-Tritia Inland Waterways and Trans-Tritia Railways action plans, this plan should be completed by 2030. The total cost is estimated at 1.35 billion euros. The individual terminals will be built gradually in a modular fashion and in an economically viable way to meet current capacity as well as increased capacity in the future. In addition to the main logistics centers, the project also includes new terminals along the Oder River and the Silesian Canal, a preliminary discussion for which was held with local authorities. The Trans-Tritia project is co-financed by the Interreg Central Europe program. For more information, visit www.interreg-central.eu/Trans-Tritia.
Tak s cílem jsem to dodržel až do konce, aby se také viděli loga partnerů, kteří nám
I wanted you to see also logos of our partners who enabled us to visit their logistics centers. These, apart from these top logistics centers, main logistics centers. We've got other centers, but for those big logistics centers, we designed a minimum area to be able to keep the basic parameters for railways as well as for ports. So designed basic storage parameters, and we approached administration and city councils and looked for possible spaces. Of course, all that needs to be compatible with the capacities, local capacities. We focused, apart from tri-modal logistic terminals, also on specialized terminals that do not reach such big areas, and it could be used for specialized goods. Then there are terminals, good station terminals, so it is meant to cover links between specific cities or towns. And then there are specialized terminals on the waterways where goods can be transferred to waterways. And these are places where in close vicinity of roads and railways. Of course, budget and money was an important part of the plan, so we have allotted a certain sum to every terminal, and we were able to calculate the total. Of course, this figure is great, but we must remember that not all of these terminals will be built after all. Then we also discussed urban plans with municipalities to find space for the terminals and to incorporate the terminals into municipality visions. We created European and international groups for the action plan. The international groups were on the level of Visegrad Group or EGTC, TRITIA. One project within this whole project is the Oder waterway, which is incorporated in the bigger plan. The action plan is ready, but it can still be developed, and we are not able to say now what the situation will be like in 2030. And thank you for your attention, and I'm ready to answer your questions.
Bardzo dziękuję panu Pawłowi za przedstawienie tych planów działania gałęziowych. Dziękujemy bardzo. Teraz poproszę pana Michała Trnka, który przedstawi nam nasz opracowany w ramach projektu model transportu, który stanowił bardzo ważny element i dostarczy nam wielu ważnych danych, informacji na temat tego ruchu, transportu, przepływu towarów na obszarze projektu, co z kolei właśnie stanowiło jakby punkt wyjścia i bazę informacyjną do opracowania tych wszystkich dokumentów, o których usłyszeliśmy przed chwilą. Także zapraszam pana Michała do prezentacji na temat modelu transportu i przeprowadzonych badań.
No, počujete ma? Je vidno prezentáciu?
I hope you can hear me and you can see my presentation.
Dobre.
Perfect. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Michal Trnka. Within the TRITIA project, I work on behalf of the Výzkumný ústav dopravní, or the Research Institute for Transport. We were responsible for the expert part of the project as far as transport is concerned, and we prepared a transport model for TRITIA. What we did within the parts, it had actually two main activities. First, we had to prepare statistical data and perform analysis, in-field analysis, that would be the basis for a traffic model. The second element or part, the most important, was to prepare the transport model itself. Within the activities, we prepared a few outcomes that describe very precisely the procedures used and evaluate all research and surveys. You can find it on the project website. You can find also results concerning the transport model on the website. To be able to prepare a transport model in such a big area that covers the Moravian Silesian region, Opole, Voivodship, and Žilina region, we needed to prepare correct methodology to receive correct data. We needed to cover the area of 34,000 square kilometers with 7 million inhabitants. That is why we decided to use 3 types of surveys that we used in the preparation phases. The most important survey was the questionnaire traffic survey across border crossings. Then we had some profile measurements, and we also did a traffic survey between manufacturers and freight transport operators. We will talk about the surveys in detail later, but first of all, the questionnaire on border crossings. It was done at borders between Slovakia, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Poland, and Czech Republic and Poland. During this survey, which was performed in a few phases, we surveyed nearly 8,000 freight vehicles. This was the statistical basis for our survey. We can have a look at the map. You can see all the 7 points where we performed the survey. In the north, it was the north of the Moravian Silesian region, then near Ostrava, Bohumín, Chotěbuz, then Český Těšín on the highway, then in Slovakia, Makov, and near Čadca, Svršinovec, and then in the east of the Žilina region, Trstena. The survey completion was quite complicated, and it was difficult to prepare. We needed to prepare a lot of documentation and a lot of approvals. We needed to get the help of police so that we could survey the driver. You can see a few photos of the survey. It's what it looked like in reality. Our partners of Transport Design and Žilina University are those who we should thank for the successful result of the survey. The next survey is the Profile Traffic Survey. We got details from 116 counting points, including 74 measurements done by automatic traffic counters and 42 out of real live counters, traffic counters on the infrastructure. What we received were results for 24 hours. The data included vehicles like PC, personal vehicles, light vehicles, freight vehicles. The map shows all the 116 points where we counted the traffic intensity. The blue color means automatic counters. These were short-term measurements that were later calculated into 24-hour intensity. Red means long-term continuous measurements that are done throughout the year.
Here we have a couple of pictures of how automobile surveys took place using counters, of using different profiles. This preparatory part served for us to process enough analytical data to create a traffic model, to calibrate it well and set it up well. When we've prepared the methodology of how to process or grasp this traffic model, we asked us a couple of questions and wanted to get answers that will help us attain our objectives. The aim of the model was to identify the potential of shifting freight flows from road transport, environmentally friendly transport nodes. Of course, we also wanted to identify bottlenecks. So we simulated potential use of infrastructure. And the result was whether we can simulate whether the current infrastructure is able to handle the potential shift of traffic. And by that, we got data from road traffic. That's why we get into the very detail during the survey, namely for road transport, which serves for long-distance transit. And from that reason, and also considering the multimodality, one truck represented one intermodal transport unit of a 40-feet container. The zero scenario in 2020 illustrates the calibrated road transport infrastructure model and related flows. The zero scenario in 2030 illustrates the natural development of the TRITIA area with planned projects defined by partners and prognosis for the development of traffic by 2030. And to be able to move and shift this potential and to identify it well, we've divided it into 3 levels where we can identify the models. The first level represents all the flows, potential flows that we've mapped in our surveys, the entire potential to be shifted from roads to railways or waterways. That represents a potential that we've assigned without any capacity limitations to the 2030 infrastructure. And the usable potential is the potential that can be handled by the infrastructure in 2030, depending on whether it is a railway or waterway infrastructure. Here we can see how the traffic model looks like. We've considered the entire Europe, and the most detailed analysis was done for the TRITIA area, and then we focused on data that have been aggregated into a wider form than needed. Here we can see the result of a simulation for 2030 and the number of containers. It reflects the maximum potential existing in road transport being shifted to railways and waterways, but of course some of them remained on roads. What we got from the survey and model, in general, in this scenario, we've modeled roughly 12 million container kilometers, which was divided into 49% to railway transport and 4% to inland waterways transport. The potential to waterways shifting is quite low. It's because we are talking about transport relation generated for TRITIA region. We haven't considered wider connections to seaports in Poland or Germany, and which would contribute more to the use of waterways. So if we look at it this way, we would be able, by 2030, we would be able to meet the objective of the white paper, which is the shift of 30% of traffic to alternative models. So there is the potential to shift the road traffic to environmentally friendly models. Then another step was mapping of the usable potential. We've analyzed the capacities of the individual sections of railroad roads and waterways. We looked for bottlenecks where there would be a problem with the capacity, where the sections would not be able to handle the shifting. Here we see the list of sections that we've identified as forming a bottleneck in 2030. This includes railway infrastructure. Only the waterways are quite sufficient as regards the capacity. So these are sections that we should focus on by 2030. And to remove the bottlenecks, which would contribute to more fluent flow of railways in Polish, Slovak, or Czech sections. To be sure whether the traffic model has been set up right, and to verify our prognosis, we've modeled a couple of alternative scenarios where we've tested the parameters. That is, for example, the GDP development, development of fees for infrastructure, reloading, transshipment, and the combined multimodal transport. And we wanted to confirm that the identified sections are the correct ones and that we need to focus on them. These scenarios are provided in detail in this table. The basic scenario is pessimistic, realistic, and optimistic development of the GDP. The realistic is plus 15% of GDP growth. We've set it up these parameters before the corona crisis or COVID crisis. So theoretically, we can also deem that by 2030, we could also use the pessimistic scenario of plus 10% GDP growth. Other scenarios were focused on the combination of growth or decrease of charges for road infrastructure use or railway infrastructure charges or handling fees. And at the end, we've created a combined scenario that describes the infrastructure of railway or road charges by 10%. The result, all results are summarized in the reports from the traffic model. This is just a part that talks about that based on the pessimistic scenario, we could shift or split 45% to roads and waterways, and in case of a combined scenario, it is roughly at the level of 50%, which means compared to the basic scenario where we had a 49% to railroads, the increase of road charges has a significant impact on the split of individual modes, transport modes. It is a way of how we can influence the usability of the models. It means currently and also in the future. Some conclusions from this entire package. We can summarize it in those couple of points. The purpose of the traffic model was to identify the potential transfer of long-distance road traffic over 300 kilometers to alternative models of transportation in the 2030 timeframe. The result of the scenario 0, as well as alternative scenarios added of the potential transfer identified in road transport, is the possibility of transferring of about 40 to 50 to railway and 2 to 4 to inland waterway transport. The traffic model included the planned measures in the entire area by 2030. And the traffic model confirmed to us that in the road transport there is sufficient potential, and when we have the infrastructure, the problem is not the infrastructure or the setup, and we have to focus on organizational measures in railway or waterway. This is my presentation of the work package, and that's all. Thank you. I will be available for your questions. I will provide provision of details.
Bardzo dziękuję panu Michałowi za przedstawienie informacji na temat modelu transportu i na temat przeprowadzonych w ramach projektu badań. To była ostatnia prezentacja z tych, które wypracowaliśmy w ramach projektu, z tych dokumentów. Teraz zapraszamy na prezentację, tą część, w której opowiemy o trochę szerszym kontekście, czyli o tym, jak kształtują się kierunki rozwoju, jak wyglądają też z perspektywy innych interesariuszy, innych uczestników tego systemu transportu towarowego, jak wyglądają te warunki, te potrzeby. A zatem teraz proszę o prezentację. Zapraszam do prezentacji panią Gabrielę Tomik, pełnomocnika, eksperta z Ministerstwa Infrastruktury, aktualnie wcześniej z Ministerstwa Gospodarki Morskiej i Żeglugi Śródlądowej. Zapraszam serdecznie panią Gabrielę Tomik.
Dzień dobry Państwu, widzimy się. Jeszcze usiłuję wprowadzić pokaz slajdów. Tak, widzę, że jest z boku od bieżącego, tak. Jeszcze raz dzień dobry. Przede wszystkim chciałam podziękować za możliwość wkładu i współpracy z Państwem. Jestem przekonana, że te 3 lata nie tylko wypracowały model, o którym tu mówimy jako owocu dorobku, ale przede wszystkim zbliżyły
certain model, but it brought closer many people representing science, business, administration, local administration, governmental administration. It brought us closer and allowed us to cooperate in highly interesting areas, areas interesting from the transportation point of view in Central Europe. So far, we have talked separately about problems in Slovakia, in the Czech Republic, in Poland. So I hope that when we start talking about inland waterways, it launched a certain system-wide observation and brought us closer to the optimum model of transportation in the Moravian region, because there is a huge potential, and you will see it in a moment in my presentation. And we are talking about the area which is now better known to us. So that is my agenda, which I divided into topics. It is the results of my position at the Ministry of Infrastructure. From January 2018, I had the pleasure and honor to lead social consultations. They started with local and territorial self-governments, but we understood very fast that we had to add new stakeholders to the table. So we added representatives of the business, some social associations, and the potential of information getting closer to the transportation corridor in the Oder Basin. Well, it was very important, and we could talk about perspective for 2020-2027. We need some historical information. In a nutshell, we are located, when we think about the Trans-Tritia area, we are located in the territory with at a certain crossroads and the routes from the north to south and from the east to west, not only due to current flows of freight transportation. No, it is also due to geographical location, and intuitively, these were centuries-long routes, and there were many human relations, trade exchanges. So we are not talking about a theoretical model. We have historical traditions in this area. 7 million people. It is the group which allows us to say that it is the region which may become a driving force for development for Central Europe. I'm talking about 3 regions in 3 countries and bringing them closer in the transportation area. And we can say very frankly that we have the Moravian Gate, and there is this flow model that has been used for years, for centuries. Obviously, there is also a river. So thanks to that, there were possibilities for alternative modes of transportation, so railways, roads, and then we need one more perspective, north, south. Definitely the Moravian Gate is the strategic area here. From my perspective as a representative of the ministry, I could see an additional value when to the Oder axis we suggested connection between the Oder and the Vistula basins, including the existing canal, class 3, class 4. I'm talking about the Vistula near Kraków. Now it is a dead end. And when we talk about the axis north-south, when we introduce the Silesian Canal on the way, we give answer or response to the biggest Eurasian terminal functioning in the Silesian region. So in this Silesian Canal model, there is Przemsza with Sławskowski's canal. We have to work on it more, but we've noticed the importance of it. And when we think about development of waterways, we need to focus on the Silesian Canal. There were consultations with business entities, but also with people representing various sectors. And the consultations gave me information that the progress in the introduction of waterways to multimodal freight transport will give us more safety in a broad sense. It integrates us and develops us. So that's my message. That's the message at the beginning of my presentation. Now I will move on to more details. So here we can see the intersection of historic and new inland routes, the map for Central Europe. Obviously, we can see roads, historical roads. And now I was talking about the intersection of the axis north-south with southern routes, and the Moravian Gates is especially important. In this area, we may think about a new waterway with international parameters, and topography makes it easier for us. If there is a question about waterways and compatibility of waterways with railways, we can say quite openly that the Oder River is communicated with railways throughout its course. So that's the corridor that was intertwined with railways. So there is a connection there. And then there is an issue of low water level. So here we are looking for ergonomic flows, flows of freight transportation. Obviously, we have to bear in mind transport of containers. So what do we have in common? Water, obviously water. So what are the conditions for the TRITIA area? First of all, I should mention some conditions in the context of inland waterways. It's been mentioned that there is high population density in the TRITIA area. There is a dense network of road connections in the region, as well as the route of A4, A1, motorways, expressways, but there are plenty of railway connections which are of great importance in the perspective 2030. Besides, we may say that this area has been highly industrialized. There were many industrialization processes in the last century on all the sides of the borders. So we also have areas which are not associated within the Upper Silesian conurbation, and it was historically highly industrialized, but today when we think about waterways and we map it on the infrastructural situation, functional situation, populational situation of the region, we have to say that many things change when you have the transport model and add a waterway to that, because the potential for future development begins, and you can see this potential in innovative technologies, innovative transportation system, including waterways. There is a possibility for a new labor market. In this situation, when we move away from the coal-based generation, so to say, plant logistical nodes, which I'm about to show to you, I wanted to present them closer to you because they show how much consulted milieux are getting closer to the idea of waterways because it gives them the guarantee of future. So the introduction of waterways is also connected with certain traditions in the labor market, because now there will be a search for the new Silesia, for new ways of life with high quality of life, so to say, as well. So all these hopes and expectations and needs when we observe waterways and how they run throughout this area, well, all these expectations can be met in cooperation with local leaders, various stakeholders who realize what are their needs locally, what are expectations, and in different programs they look for solutions to their challenges. This map shows us inland waterways in multimodal transport, and they try to reflect certain expectations from stakeholders. Let me just mention the southern section from Opole southwards towards Niepołomice, because that's the area when we talk about the Trans-Tritia area. As for north to south, so from Świnoujście to the border crossing in Chałupki, we can observe a lot of goodwill for cooperation among local stakeholders in individual cities. Some of them are well located within this transportation model. Some of them are industrially involved in developments of existing nodes or designing new nodes. So you have some new names on this map, so far it was called the Wrocław node, but now there are new names, and the Wrocław agglomeration, which is really huge, may receive various services from the north and from the south by well-connected nodes, by road, by railways, and there is a great access to existing canal on the Oder. Let me go back to the south in the interesting area starting from the port basin in Gliwice on the Gliwice Canal and starting from Kędzierzyn-Koźle, we move towards the Silesian region and we show the possibility of using this water bridge, which we call the Silesian Canal and Upper Vistula. So this bridge may support the flow of transit freights, because nowadays they are actually moved on the road, they are transported via roads. And can we afford such solutions, such expensive environmental solutions? Or perhaps we should improve the comfort or flow capacity of the existing corridor by improving and broadening the Silesian Canal, which will be translated into better capacity parameters for the transportation corridor between the east and the west. And just out of curiosity, perhaps, a list of conclusions after the consultations, because we receive so much information from our stakeholders and administrations, local government administrations that cooperate with us. The capacity of the multimodal transport corridor goes up, increases with the accessibility to a waterway, but the waterway needs international parameters. Multimodal platforms along the routes of the transport chain have optimal capacity if they have the right handling capacity, the right handling infrastructure. They need to have spatial capital as well. If we talk about opportunities, we talk about hundreds of hectares dedicated to providing services for the transport chain, freight transport chain, and only provided that all these conditions are met with the existing transportation model and existing categories of roads and railways, the model of waterways is the optimum solution, because we can use these transportation models to the optimum, to the maximum. So what can I say here? Here, I'd like to say then your opinion then translated into a model is very useful for us and is a very significant contribution for preparing the intermodal transportation model in the cross-border area. So a lot of hard work has been done. I'm glad I could be an observer and to some extent cooperate with you and pass on the materials, because they are a great supplement of all the achievements and all the efforts and works over the Oder waterways with the border section, so connection between the Oder and the Danube and the Silesian Canal. Let me just say that the most difficult time ahead of us, the most difficult stage ahead of us, it is environmental assessment. It will be prepared and it will actually close this section. And here we have prepared that starting in 2018, according to the schedule approved by our government, and our works will be completed next year, the first quarter 2021. So prepare the full program with all the answers to environmental questions throughout the western border as for the model of waterway transportation. And then our transportation analysis, I guess it was the last element of cargo or freight transportation, because we wanted to do them as for intermodal transport model. So it was not focused on waterways only. No, we wanted to fit into existing freight streams and freight flows. Today we are focusing on the cross-border area. I'm showing one of the models as an element of closed transport analysis. It's been completed and it attracts our attention to powiats, so that we can see where the logistics will require some access to a waterway. So I guess what you have prepared is a great supplement to our model. And if I can ask you for further cooperation in cross-border projects, well, I'd like to encourage you to continue cooperation. So now what is ahead of us? Well, money and the financial perspective 2021-27. I used the website that you may know, because there are updates there, interesting information, the corridor, the Baltic, Adriatic corridor. Now it is being prepared. It is not there yet. So my colleagues, they will have other presentations, will give you more information about that. So this image is the period 2016-2018, but 2020 will be a breakthrough year when Poland, together with the Czech Republic, Slovakia, and the whole model of perhaps 3 seas area in this area of Baltic Adriatic corridor. And that's all from me. Many thanks for our cooperation. It's been an honor for me. And next to me, there is Captain Czesław Szarek, inland navigation captain. And as Professor Don has said at the beginning, there were many people, many stakeholders, many experts who helped us to reorganize our approach to existing waterways and explained how it is possible to enter waterways that we have right now to improve water balance and to improve the whole infrastructure. and move towards intermodal freight transport without waiting for the next financial perspective. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I just wanted to say hello. I hope everyone is successful and our joint project is successful as well. My contact data at the Ministry of Infrastructure, you may contact me. I'm also here at the chat. If you have questions at the chat, that's fine, but you may contact me later as well. There is my email. So that's all from me for now. Thank you very much for your attention.
Dziękujemy bardzo pani Gabrieli za prezentację.
Gabriela, thank you so much for your presentation. We thank you very much for your kind words and for this excellent collaboration. I'll get back to that later on, and let us now move on to the next presentation on the importance of collaboration between two types of branches of transportation, that is waterways and inland waterways and rail. The floor is yours. I guess there are some connection issues. Let us move on to the next point on the agenda. Well, perhaps we could move on to the next presentation, and if possible, if only possible, is Dariusz Stefański from PCC Intermodal SA, is he available? Are you available, Mr. Stefański? Well, good afternoon, everyone.
I rozwoju. Słychać, widać, także zapraszamy do
Yeah, we can hear you and we can see you. Excellent.
Spróbuję w takim razie. Jeszcze raz dzień dobry wszystkim. Czy dalej mnie słychać i widać, co pokazuję?
Can you hear me and can you see me? We can see your email. We can see your email. No, not necessarily. I wanted everyone to see my emails.
Może jest zminimalizowana, może tam trzeba po prostu ten plik wybrać jeszcze raz.
Perhaps you need to choose.
Jeszcze to samo?
Cały czas to samo. No proszę. To spróbujmy jeszcze raz.
Chyba że my ze swojej strony byśmy.
A teraz jestem?
O, teraz się, tak, teraz się pojawiła prezentacja.
Now we have it. That's excellent. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you once again. I wasn't sure whether I would be presenting in English or in Polish, but it seems like everyone is speaking our language, and the interpreters, they catch up and they're good in terms of keeping up with the pace of the presentations. My presentation is in Polish. Listening to what Gabriela was saying about waterways and about experts at the ministry level, intermodal for 10 years now has been begging the ministry to assign someone to the intermodal topic. So let us hope that that changes at some point. Very briefly, well, there is an educational program or concept for kids, which is an odyssey of a mind or odyssey of a brain. And it consists of 3 building blocks: dreaming and thinking, and the third one is creating. So we're at this third component. We entrepreneurs, we don't have that comfort of work. We need to put ideas and dreams to action, even if somehow prematurely. So I would like to cover bottlenecks and barriers to the intermodal transportation. As much as I appreciate all efforts to include our waterways for the purpose of our freight transport, when we speak about inland intermodal transportation, we need to focus on the rail and road transport. We do our best to to transfer as much freight as we can from roads to rail. You've been working hard on your presentations and your texts, but I've had the same, exactly the same presentation for 10 years. And actually I could keep on repeating this presentation, showing this presentation on and on for the next century or so. Well, the issues with the intermodal transportation remain as they were. So actually, I have 2 types of barriers. So we have, I have infrastructural barriers and access to the infrastructure that could be combined and presented as one issue. As you all know very well, the quality of the rail infrastructure, in particular in the southern corridor, which is the key point here, well, to put it mildly, leaves a lot to wish for. So the quality of that is poor, plus we keep on modernizing it, but there are still closed down words like traffic control systems being installed, so it works poorly. And on top of that, when it comes to the organization, well, management, well, that leaves a lot of to wish for and to prove. Well, everybody's happy, to put it briefly, when the transport reaches 60 kilometers per hour. So that's the speed we can have. So now the question is access to the rail infrastructure too expensive? That is possible, but on the other hand, that would imply that access to the road infrastructure is too cheap. It's not expensive enough. But in spite of many meetings and concepts, we haven't been able to change the perception of the intermodal transport in the rail sector, in spite of our efforts. The rail is persistently claiming that they carry the tonnage. They use concepts like gross mass of a train and other measuring units, but we know very well that transportation is carrying certain weight units, containers, and so on. And if we look at any other means of transport, when we transfer container by vessels, no one analyzes contents of a container and what's inside. You pay for the weight, for the mass of the container, for the transfer of a container as it's transferred from point A to point B. When a big truck is crossing a motorway, no one is asking the big truck driver about the specific way of tonnage of a container on that big truck, as long as it remains within the limits. So that's the first dilemma. That's the first big question mark. What should we do with this issue? Nowadays, it is very difficult to have such freight trains running at a higher speed. The fee for that, the money for that would be the same, and there is no inclination to change anything in this area. So it seems that we might be spending a lot of money on modernizing the rail infrastructure, but if the manner of running the infrastructure, controlling it and managing doesn't change, we will continue with the status quo. We've, on several occasions, we propose to make the access fees dependent on the commercial speed, which is offered by the operator. So the higher the speed, the higher the fee. And in case of the speed being below the standard transfer speed, these fees should be reduced or wholly abandoned. But I think it remains to, that issue remains to be discussed by our children or even grandchildren, because the pace of solving that is very slow. So if we look at transportation in this new Silk Road, it's difficult to understand that it takes for a train to get to the Polish-Belarusian border 16 to 12 days when compared to 3 or 4 days in the Czech or Republic or in Slovakia. So it's highly surprising. It's not highly surprising that that transport chooses other means. Since Gabriela, she specializes in waterways, I'll try to talk you into trying your hand at the rail and rail solutions. Intermodal was to link, to connect these two modes of transport. We're looking forward to having a department that would combine all these modes of transport and work for the sake of the natural environment. Unfortunately, we don't have a single employee, a single functionary, a single team or department at the Ministry of Infrastructure whom we can complain to or ask to help us to improve things in these areas. I think this is the biggest barrier in overcoming intermodal transportation barriers in the Baltic-Adriatic corridor. What is also interesting, and that hasn't been mentioned yet here, Whole Europe keeps on saying that intermodal or multimodal, that's the right way to go about it, to relieve the road traffic from the extra cargo traffic. But nowadays, when we look at the operation of intermodal, you might find it difficult to believe, but in most cases, the addressees of the cargo, they demand from intermodal operators to operate on the international on the international transport letter and consignment letter. So if we were to use 3 different modes of transport, so imagine that we carry a container on a big truck, and then it is transferred or loaded onto a train, and we have the same shipping document for it, and then it is it travels by waterways, and then the client would expect the shipping document, which has been approved or certified by the first handler, by the first handling agency. So, well, at the level of banks, insurance companies, and exchange of information among and between clients, where that shipping document, it has been the bone of contention. So we haven't got to the stage yet that the intermodal is broadly accepted by all trade and business partners. And in this respect, a lot remains to be done. We would need that calls for a team of experts. Then we have a whole group of our local obstacles and barriers. You might not be aware that for several years now, we have been struggling with the discriminative attitude of the largest terminal, which is deepwater container terminal in Gdańsk, BCT Gdańsk. On the one hand, Gdańsk and Gdynia and I guess Szczecin and Świnoujście ports in the nearest future, they have their dream to expand their operational area, their catchment area, so they get containers from Slovakia and the Czech Republic. So we can grow the business together. But it cannot be done. It's not doable when at port, when a container arrives to that port, they do not pay a fee, but they deliver a container from a client, but then the terminal charges an additional handling fee from each container arriving by rail, although that type of rail transport, that rail cargo is again not a client to the terminal. So on the one hand, we want to transform everything into intermodal, but the truth is that there are very few who support development of the intermodal, and not directly and indirectly. We need to do a lot to support intermodal transportation. We've been for 15 years on the market. This is a map of our intermodal connections, and I have a very good reason for it. Although we have been trying for years to operate on this Baltic Adriatic corridor and other corridors, we've made some attempts, like we're trying to have a connection between Sopron, and we're trying to launch a connection with Vienna. For the time being, because of transit, the connecting Polish ports with transit points, it's not feasible for the reason of timing. So as you know very well, a train driver cannot work more than for 12 hours in a shift. So the shifts would have to be planned in such ways that that would call for 3 to 4 train drivers operating in the same train in order to deliver and transfer cargo on a specific route. So I hope that we can meet again in 3 or 4 years, and I hope that at that point in time I will be able to tell you that I won't have any presentation for you because of lack of bottlenecks and difficulties in the intermodal transport. I wish from all my heart that I can only say that in 3 or 4 years' time. Thank you very much, Dariusz. And let me add to that, we also hope that because of our projects, you will be able to change that presentation. There will be some improvements in this area, and this presentation is well, not needed. I very much look forward to it. So my understanding is that these technical difficulties connection with Zofia Kowalska that has been overcome. So Zofia will tell us about the rail and waterways. Thank you.
Jeżeli można, przed chwilą otrzymałam informację
If
telefoniczną.
I may, I received a phone call from Zofia, and she still has a problem with connection. So now it's almost 1:30, so I don't know whether we can try once again. There was a suggestion that they will stay in touch with us, but there are still problems with the connection, unfortunately. So they do apologize. Zofia apologizes, but the connection may not be possible. All right, thank you for the information. Well, that's possible that this presentation will be simply skipped during today's final conference, but we'll stay in touch. Perhaps we'll succeed after all with the presentation. So let us move on to Krzysztof Rodziewicz from the Center of Transport Projects, and he will tell us more about directions of development for intermodal transport in Poland. So, and now it's time for Krzysztof Rodziewicz. The floor is yours.
Dzień dobry, szanowni państwo.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for inviting me here. I'm glad I could join the conference, which is the final conference for your project, summarizing its results. It is my great pleasure to represent our Transport Project Center, and I'm glad towards the end of the project we could contribute and cooperate with you. For us, it was a great experience because we have learned a lot, for example, about the transportation model that you have worked out. On the other hand, we could share our own experiences with you and perhaps help take stock of some of the investments and the current condition or stage of implementation. So today I would like to discuss the document, which is now under procedure, and its title is Directions of Intermodal Transport Development in Poland until 2030, with the perspective until 2040. And during this brief presentation, I would like to discuss the stages of implementation, what's the current situation of several data connected with intermodal transport, then transport modeling, which also involves our center, and I will discuss the aim, scope, and structure of the intermodal transport documents. So by means of introduction, my presentation is entitled exactly like the document is. So as I've mentioned, preparation of the document took place at the Center for EU Transport Projects, and it was commissioned by the Minister of Infrastructure. As for our Center for EU Transport Projects, let me just say that we are an institution which is part of the system of implementation of EU funds. We pass on EU funds for big infrastructural investments under the program Infrastructure and Environment, but also under the Connecting Europe facility or Eastern Poland program. So let me move on. The scope of analytical work was obviously much broader, but the key information for last year, for example, is visible on the slide. For example, you can see here that last year was record-breaking as for container transport via railways. It was more than 2 million, to be more specific, 2.137 million trucks. Containers transported by a railway. So it was just a confirmation of certain growing trends on the railways. On the other hand, Polish ports transshipped more than 3 million trucks. And thanks to that, Poland became #1 in transshipment in the Baltic Sea ports, and then 44% of containers in intermodal transport are delivered by railways. So everything seems very good, yet the volume of intermodal transportation is still rather low. As for the weight, the mass of the freight, the goods, it is like 1%. So 1% is the share of intermodal transport in terms of weight of goods, and 87% of the mass of cargo is transported via roads. So there is a huge gap, there is a huge potential for increasing transportation of containers, but in order to do that, we need to start very specific actions, as Mr. Stefański has mentioned. Without the main partner at a political level, at the level of the government or the ministry, it is quite difficult to change the situation for the better. As for the infrastructure, because it is one of the most important elements here, the elements which were analyzed by our center, we have almost 40 intermodal terminals. Basically, it is the data for the end of last year, so the end of 2019. It is changing dynamically. We had more than 4,200 railway platforms to transport containers. If we dig deeper, we may come to certain conclusions whether this number is sufficient, whether the technical condition is at the right quality level, so to say. But then some more numbers, 19.5 thousand kilometers of railway lines, and there are 3 corridors for freight transportation, 3 railway corridors. Since Poland joined the European Union, the intermodal transport found its place in support programs, and the first program was for the years 2004 and 2006, and then The amount allocated for that was rather negligible, but at the moment you can see the numbers are much more impressive. So since 2004, it was in total around 410 million euro. It is support for intermodal projects. As you can see, the biggest pool of EU funds was allocated for the intermodal transport in the current financial perspective, so up to 2020. As for directions of flows, in the first map, you can see black lines which demarcate the transit of trucks. So it shows the main direction of freight transportation on the roads in Poland. And the second map shows the main directions of intermodal transportation, so transit connections as well. And here you may notice that as for taking cargo out of seaports, we focus mostly on the territory of Poland. If something is taken outside of the southern border, well, in terms of value, it is minimum like 2–3%, not more. So there is definitely a huge potential there, but there are certain barriers which were mentioned by Mr. Stefański, but which make it possible to have efficient traffic to the south or through the southern border. It is connected with the possibility of handling of the trains of the right length or like speed on the line or axle pressure. So when we have the current situation, perhaps we should mention the traffic model. And there is work being done on the traffic model. It was also commissioned by the Minister of Infrastructure. And it is the model of traffic which will have two functions. Number one is to support the process of strategic planning for transportation, and the other goal or the other function, it will be an element of meeting initial conditions for the new financial perspective in order to be able to obtain EU funds to co-finance the investment in the infrastructure. At the moment, we are building the passenger model, and the passenger model will be ready by the end of 2020. So the passenger model will have a freight component as well, but the freight component will be developed further in order to prepare the final freight model. It will be developed further next year. Definitely, we can take advantage of your experiences here because you were modeling transportation in the trans-border area, and we already use the data that we received from you. We also use the model that we received from the Ministry of Economy and from the Ministry of Water Management and Inland Navigation, which provided some support to us in our freight components or freight model, which is being prepared. As for the document that we have prepared, it is a program document in line with the strategy for sustainable development and in line with the strategy for sustainable transportation development by 2030. It is a certain supplement of the gap, to fill in the gap and to try and reconcile different kinds of transport, different modes of transport. We wanted to bring them together in one document. I have to say that it wasn't a simple task because there is this lack of connection or separate departments like road departments, railways departments at the ministry. So if we want to find the common parts, the joint policy Well, it is a process. It's not very simple. It is a long-lasting process and requires consent of all the participants at the right level of authority. As for the structure of the documents, it is based on the current situation analysis in the areas which are strictly connected with intermodal transport. We analyzed the strategic context, we analyzed the formal context, the technical context, financial conditions, and financial support that has been given so far and possibilities for further financial support. We defined development trends and forecasts for intermodal transport with special emphasis on railways. We identified barriers, opportunities, and challenges for development of intermodal transport on the basis of a survey and in-depth interviews. And we presented a certain vision and strategic goals, and then detailed goals. And we suggested specific actions and potential owners of the processes, as well as planned dates of implementation. Then there is a system of implementation, monitoring and evaluation, and possible financial sources. So, our strategic goal was to enhance the importance of Poland in global supply chains. There was a certain vision that we bore in mind in implementing the project. But we also wanted to have optimum situation in intermodal transportation and enhancing role of railways in intermodal transportation. As for three operating goals, we focused on complex projects, taking advantage of intermodal transport in supply chains. We wanted to improve competitiveness of intermodal transport and digitize the intermodal transport. And then we have detailed. Let me go back perhaps to the previous slide for a second. So operating goals and very specific goals. Under the first goal formulated here, there are specific actions for development of point infrastructure, line infrastructure, sidings, railway sidings, or support for purchase of state-of-the-art means of transportation. As for the second one, it will be about the tool supporting balance between the roads and the railways. We tried to address various topics here, and we wanted to allocate certain and ascribe certain activities that should be performed by the individual owners in the near future. We also wanted to improve the management and organization of the intermodal transport system. And here there is actually an answer to some postulates of Mr. Stefański. It's been also noticed by the European Commission and by the environment of experts in this respect, because there was a lacking unit or lack of a certain entity that would be dedicated to intermodal transport, and it would take care of that topic. And sometimes it simply needs to act for the benefit of small changes that do not ensue expensive or high outlays, but still they would facilitate the situation and improve the situation of intermodal transport in Poland. And the third goal is digitization. So it is about state-of-the-art technologies and support of R&D projects for development of intermodal transport. As I've mentioned, the document presents forecasts and scenarios as well. So here we mention two scenarios, namely the first one, which focuses on promoting import and export directions, focused on the national potential in generating intermodal transport, And the other scenario supports transit transportation, and it is what colloquially or stereotypically is treated as the positive feature of our country, as the country which has the great location and potential for transit transportation. Our modest estimates based on analysis show that the increase of intermodal transportation by railway will grow to 3 million trucks before 2030, despite the fact that at the moment we expect some decreases connected with the state of economy. Paradoxically, in the first half of 2020, container transport by railway went up, and they were higher by 16% as compared with the same period of the last year. But that is just a digression. We don't need more details right now, I guess. What else can I say? We were trying to group actions connected with individual goals, and we call these groups flagship projects. And as I've said, we are trying to say that one of the important goals is to focus on expert-input relations. Then we want to eliminate bottlenecks. It is one of basic barriers for development of intermodal transport via railway. The next flagship is Eastern Poland. What do I mean by that? It is about construction of terminals, that's one thing, and basically improving transportation around the eastern border of the European Union and Poland. And the fourth project is transit, so all the activities, including customs and taxation activities that would enhance attractiveness of intermodal transport. As for the schedule for preparing the document, because here and now it is quite topical, I would say. So the work on the document was completed in July. Let me just mention that since 26 October till 30th November, we have social consultations of the document together with its environmental impact. And on the 23rd of November, so it is next Monday, we will have a conference and meeting connected with this document. So we will present the documents in public, and under consultations we'll try to answer all the questions and adjust the provisions of the document in such a way that it is really the document of the highest possible quality, satisfying not only us, the authors, but the ministry which approved it, but the document should also give hope that this movement towards finding the owner of intermodal transport is efficient. We want to make it efficient. So in the presentation, you see addresses to two websites. So directions of development of intermodal transport, that's the first website address, and the other one is for our Center for EU Transport Projects. There is a tab on intermodal transportation there, so you will find plenty of information about the document itself, annexes, and information about consultations, a possibility to send remarks or participate in the conference that will be held next Monday, 10 o'clock. It will be broadcast on the YouTube channel of Center for EU Transportation Projects, so everyone may register and participate in the conference. It is also possible to participate in the conference via Skype. So let me sum it up. because I can see I'm running out of time and I don't want to test your patience. So some conclusion information. So we worked on the document for like half a year. And I need to mention that there was a survey during the pandemic time, and we received 76 full responses out of 433 sent. Maybe it is not much, maybe it is quite a lot, but I guess it gives us a certain picture of certain problems incurred by the sector. We had technical support from Joanna Pieregut, Professor Pieregut from the Higher School of Economics in Warsaw. So we analyzed good practices of 5 EU countries. And thanks to that, we could come to certain conclusions. And then we aggregated conclusions into quite general suggestions, but we believe they are suitable, they are appropriate for a document of that kind. I guess that's all from me. I'd like to say thank you very much for your attention. And I'd like to say to Alexandra, many thanks for our good cooperation within the project. And I'd like to wish you that the results of the project are implemented, efficient, and will give us, we hope they will give us the results, namely our dreams will come true. So thank you very much indeed for your attention.
Krzysztof, I also thank you for your presentation. We also thank you for this excellent collaboration. We're very grateful and good luck with the next documents. We're happy that with our project, well, you could also use what we contributed to your project, to your studies. Unfortunately, we won't be hearing from the speaker that could not connect with us because of some technical issues. I thank you very much for all the presentations. I thank you for your participation in this meeting. And first, let me thank partners and all project partners and all stakeholders, all institutions and participants who've been so actively involved in the delivery of this project. Today, we're discussing project results and project outcomes and planned deliverables and what we've achieved throughout the period. So we've had all these 3 years of workshops and meetings and working together. So the key point here is that we re-emphasized and focused on the importance of collaboration, because transportation entities, companies and stakeholders, they need to work together, not only at the regional level, but between and among sectors. So we need to listen to our concepts and arguments and suggestions in order to overcome barriers and strive to reach our goals and the objectives that we have, because together we can truly implement the solutions which can improve the reality. We work together in the project for a few years now. We have a huge potential. The area of the project is indeed the area which must become stronger and must be growing. We have identified the barriers and we have the potential, we have the capacity, we have our strategic studies, and we just simply cannot let all these ideas, suggestions remain at this stage only. Niestety tłumacz nie słyszy mówcy. Unfortunately, there was a brief interruption in the connection. So the project continues happily. So we look forward to continuing working with you. So that's all from us, from TRITIA project. We thank you very much again for your participation, and we truly hope that the information that we have from you will be useful and will serve you for improved continuation of your operation. So at this point, before we close the session, may you please answer very briefly this one question from us. It is available on our website. So this question is available on our conference website, and after the conference, our materials will be also available, can be delivered to you, and together with the questionnaire question and replies and responses to that question. Please check the website of our project with all the papers and relevant reports and studies. Thank you, and I look forward to continuing working with you.